Okay, we're back in session. I have a motion moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Carlson, that the July 9th, 2015 Regional Council closed session report be received, and further that the recommendations contained within the confidential reports relating to items 18.1 and 18.3 listed on the September 10th, 2015 Regional Council agenda be approved and become public upon adoption. And further that the oral in-camera report titled Update Regarding Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations, brackets Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations, listed as item 18.4 be received. And further that the oral in-camera report titled Update on a Matter of Litigation, Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, listed as item 18.5 be received. And further that the oral in-camera report titled Update on a Matter of Litigation, Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, listed as item 18.6 be received. Mayor Crombie?
Wanted to move receipt of the presentations and discussions, and also direction to ask our solicitor to report back on the facilitation in 4 weeks.
That'll just be added because what I just read includes what you had said, except for the direction to report back. So we'll add that as an amendment. Any further discussion? Everybody clear on what's just been read?
Just receiving the in-camera.
We're receiving the in-camera reports.
Just receiving.
Okay. With the amendment of direction to come back. All those in favor then?
You've got a question.
Oops. Oh, sorry, there's a question. My apologies. Councillor Gibson?
Good understanding. Are we just receiving, or is there direction there? I heard direction for a report back on.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And now, is there any other motions coming out with respect to that? But there can be. Councillor Miles?
I guess I'm a little bit confused, but I would put a motion on the floor to rescind the motion that was passed by council on the date of July.
It was June 25th, I think it was.
June 25th, the motion that was passed by council. I would ask that it be rescinded.
Okay, and that would require a 2/3 vote if I'm not mistaken. Do we have a seconder? Okay. Councillor Moore.
Recorded votes, 2/3.
And a recorded vote's been requested?
On the board, the June 25th motion?
Yeah, we can put it on the screen. No?
The June 25th?
Yeah.
I think she's typing up the phone.
No, it's, Councillor Sporbier, it's to rescind the June 25th motion. Yeah. I guess you call the vote. All in favor? Please, no, what? Oh, list? No?
Is it a recording vote?
Recorded? Okay, so that's...
So this is the motion to rescind.
Okay, all those in favor of rescinding the motion that's on the board, June 25th? It takes a 2/3 vote to do that. All in favor of rescission, please rise. Councillor Downey, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Groves, Councillor Innes, Councillor Miles, Councillor Moore, Councillor Shaughnessy, Councillor Sprovieri, Mayor Thompson, and Councillor Tovey. All those opposed, please rise. Councillor Carlson, Mayor Crombie, Councillor Ionica, Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Mahoney, Councillor McFadden, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Raz, Councillor Starr. For 2/3, 15 were required. The motion fails.
I guess I can't speak to this because it's already been voted on.
Okay, moving right along. Takes us to items related to health. Councillor Moore, if you'd be kind enough to chair this portion.
Members of council, you have the items related to health before you. The first is the report from the Water Fluoridation Committee, meeting of July the 9th. They are here for receipt. Councillor Sprovieri.
Madam Chair, as council is aware, the committee was set up to organize a workshop for this and to invite experts on both sides of the issue to come and present to council on the workshop. According to our staff, staff have contacted a number of experts on both sides of the issue, and it would appear that there's a definite, and perhaps staff can speak to this, but it appears to me that the people who have agreed to come, there's one that is definite in opposition. There's two indefinite in agreement of supporting fluoridation, and the fourth one, we really don't know whether he's for or against. Now, I believe that the intent of the council was to have an even playing field, to have 2 and 2 or 3 and 3 to come and present to council. Now, it is my understanding that one of the people who was one of the best experts in Canada, Dr. Hardy Lineback, actually a Mississauga resident, and also he was the head of the department at University of Toronto in dentistry research department. He was asked, and he turned down the invitation. But I did contact him before I went on vacation, and I asked him if he would reconsider. And he has reconsidered, and he said he's willing to come. So I would ask council, Madam Chair, to re-invite Dr. Hardy Lineback to participate in this workshop.
Okay, Councillor Sprovieri, I'm going to ask the commissioner if she'd like to speak on this, or the acting medical officer, one of the two. They can arm wrestle.
So through you, Chair. Councillor Sprovieri, we've just become aware of Dr. Lineback's decision to change the initial response that he gave to the invitation. So you're quite right. We did invite Dr. Lineback, and the terms under which we actually invited experts to present at the educational session that we were organizing on behalf of council were agreed upon by the committee. Dr. Lineback was indeed one of those presenters who was invited. He originally declined the invitation to present, and he has, we've just received word as well that he may be considering or reconsidering that initial decision. So my suggestion would be that we're happy to review other participants, again, by the terms as set out by the Water Fluoridation Committee, and would be welcome to bringing that back to the next meeting of the committee.
Okay. In addition to that, Madam Chair, I would ask that the one expert who's an expert on toxicology, I believe that we should have a clarification at the committee whether he has an opinion on water fluoridation one way or another, because if he does, if he has an established opinion, whether he be for or against, then I think it's really important that if he's opposed to water fluoridation, then it would be a 3 against 2. And if he's for water fluoridation, it would be also 3 against 2. So to get an even number, I believe that we need to clarify whether he's for or against, or whether he's neutral, and then to try to find another person, whether he be for or against, to have a level playing field. I believe it's really important that we meet the terms of the council resolution intention, and that we invite. I provided some additional names to staff that they can contact, and I'm sure that try to get a balance, an even balance.
Okay.
And I think that was the whole intention of the whole exercise.
Dr. Davila?
So through you, Chair, with respect to the toxicologist who was presented, you'll recall from the committee that in fact the toxicologist is there not from a philosophical perspective, but from a toxicological perspective. So he's there to bring an objective perspective, which is premised on toxicology. It's not an opinion per se, it's actually fact in respect of toxicology. With respect to other presenters, as per the terms of the committee, we have investigated and put forth before the committee our assessment using the criteria that the committee approved for those participants for the workshop. If there are other names, and again, they meet the criteria as determined by the committee for the educational session and for the speakers themselves, we're very happy to bring those back for discussion at the next committee meeting.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson?
Yes, I'm going to say, I think this issue, it's a huge one, and I really think we need to have good information. And I know the poll had come out and it says in the report on who wants to participate and who doesn't. This is a serious and a very important issue that we need to have the facts. And I believe it's sound judgment. And right now, I'm very supportive of fluoride, and I've heard John's argument. But I'm saying I'm willing to walk in with an open mind, and I think everybody should have a workshop, and I really think we need to hear the science, that we make an informed decision on where we're going here, because this is very huge. And the big thing is right now, in my opinion, the fluoridation is helping the people, especially we have a lot of new Canadians, and this has a huge service to this. So I really think before we get going, I know there's a split feeling here. I really think it's important we have the workshop, and I encourage you to do it. And with the recommendations, both what you are, Dr. Villa and Councillor Sprovieri have already said, I think it shows it's very important that we go ahead and have this.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish?
Yes, I thought we were going to do the paramedics one after we did the minutes, but since we happen to be in 8.21, I will address it. 8.21, you can see the numbers as Dr. Thompson. Okay, as Mayor Thompson has pointed out, the one-day workshop has 10, the 2 half-days 4, and then there were 11 that said, to heck with it, we're not coming because we've made up our minds. There's a piece of information I'd like to give you. I came upon a master's degree report by Dr. Ito, and the study was done here in the region of Peel. Dr. Ito happens to be a supporter of fluoride, but his thesis, when you read it, says 65% of the kids in Brampton had cavities and 64% in the Caledon test without fluoride had cavities. So this is a fascinating report. I'd like to have it condensed down by Dr. Davila. I'd like to circulate it, and I'd like to encourage everybody to change that number from 14 willing to participate to 24 willing to participate. I promise you we'll make it interesting. I promise you we'll have good food. And I promise you you'll have actually data that's from Peel from 2007 from a doctor's master's thesis. So I'm encouraging everybody to attend this workshop. I think it's going to make a difference. I frankly don't care which experts are called in. I think we have this fight every time we have the fluoride meeting. I think Dr. Davila knows what she's doing. I think the staff knows who they can get, and they can balance it well. We were a little concerned at the $25,000 price tag because they think we're flying somebody in from California. But as has been pointed out by Mayor Thompson, it's an important issue. And when it's over this time, it's going to be over.
It's either going to be fluoride in, fluoride out. And I think it has to be done with a lot of new people having a really good experience with the workshop. So I am going to have Dr. Ito's thesis. It's quite thick, condensed down, and I'm not doing it because I might have a bias, so I'm going to have Dr. Davila do it. She's going to hate me. But I think it's important to get that on that workshop agenda and to get everybody out that can come out. So we'll pick a date. We're going to survey you again, pick a date that everybody says, yeah, I think I can make it. One of the Thursdays you're supposed to leave free for regional business. And I promise you, dancing girls, fabulous food, maybe a gin and tonic.
Are you doing the dancing?
No, I'm not doing the dancing. I'd scare everyone away. But I promise you it will be entertaining. It won't be boring. And we will do whatever we need to do to keep you entertained and here and interested in what we're talking about. So that's my comment. And I want Mr. Spovieri to stop messing around with Dr. Davila's lineup. Stop it. Stop it. Okay.
Consider yourself reprimanded. Mayor Crombie.
In the interest of full disclosure, I was one of those people who voted against the all-day session or any session because I had made up my mind. I think that fluoride in the water is very helpful. I know as a child growing up, I had a mouthful of cavities, and I can see that my children have none. So that's the only proof I need. But since we are going to proceed, I will participate and have both ears open. I think this is a very serious issue, and it affects families with children, families in Peel with children. These families aren't aware we're even considering this action. So not only should we have an education session, I think we need to have an open public session as well. We need to have the public here to express their views. They need to know what we're undertaking and what we're considering because it's going to affect their health and the health of their children, the dental health of their children. So I think we not only have an educational session for us, but we have a full open public consultation as well, because people aren't aware we're even considering this. I looked at the documents that MPP Bob Delaney gave me, and it gave me cause for concern. Certainly the province is on side with fluoride, and I know that the chair of the committee, Chair Parrish, was going to write to the province to see if that would hold and if they would prevent us from removing fluoride, should that be the decision we take, and I hope that you do, because I like to see that in black and white. But this is a very important decision for the families of Peel, and I think we should be very cautious and take it very slowly. No snap decisions, no snap votes. We have to have full information, full disclosure, and then we have to go to the public, because these are our children whose dental health will be affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree with Mayor Crombie and Mayor Thompson. And coming from a background where this is something that is part of my background, it's a gray area, obviously. I know that the Ontario Dental Association has no concerns with fluoride and fluoridation. And the thesis that this doctor wrote, Councillor Parrish, it's not just about the fluoride, it's also economic. I mean, it's a variety of things that impact that. It's whether or not children are brushing their teeth at night. It's whether or not what they're eating. It's all of those things. So it really isn't just the fluoride that's causing, it's not just the fluoride. There is no harm in my opinion, and fluoride in the water, I believe, and I'm sure Mr. Schiller can address it, it's restrictive, it's monitored, it is controlled, it is not harmful. I'm sure if it was harmful, the region of Peel wouldn't have it in the water, because that's certainly something that, especially under the Clean Water Act, you have to really monitor. So, it is a gray area, and like I said, I've seen, Mayor Crombie, children with who are within areas that have fluoridated water, the difference in their dental health. And the other thing is that
Councillor Groves, we're here to really receive the minutes of the meeting.
Okay. Well, we'll receive the minutes of the meetings, but I
I
guess...
guess I was enjoying the conversation just way too much here, but seriously, we are debating or not even debating, we're here to receive the minutes of
We'll
the-
receive the minutes, but I will just put my 2 cents out there in my opinion, my thoughts on the fluoride.
She says it with those
beautiful
And that's a
teeth.
reminder.
How can anybody
That's a
not say
reminder.
we're done?
Thank
Fluoride
you.
teeth.
And that's a reminder to the next 2 speakers as well. Councillor Toby?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I had a question of the committee, if you wouldn't mind, and possibly a suggestion. I think when we start talking about fluoride, it brings into a broader discussion, and the discussion is what is the quality of Peel's water like? Councillor, I have the most beautiful water plant. Andrew's up there. Andrew Farr does a great job. And, we have this amazing water facility down in my ward. It's literally right behind my house. We hardly use any chlorine anymore. We use ozone to purify the water, disinfect the water. We also now use ultraviolet radiation, and the water passes over it at a certain cycle to be able to further purify the water.
And your suggestion to the committee is?
So my suggestion is, well, I had a question. My first question is, how many people on council have been to and taken a tour on our new upgraded water plant? In the past 8 months?
Oh, no.
Past 4 weeks? Oh, good for you. Awesome. Okay, so that's a few. So that's fantastic. But what I would like to suggest is that I think that it would be very instructive for the water fluoridation people to go and take that tour with our scientists, so that they can see actually how we purify water in the region of Peel, how much chlorine we put in, which is far more dangerous than fluoride, by the way, and how much fluoride we put in, and how that is done, and how it's all monitored for quality. I think that would be a good baseline of knowledge for the people on the committee to have. And I also think that it'd be a great place to hold one of these sessions, because it's a beautiful facility. It's got a nice green roof and a great boardroom. So there's lots of room for it, and Carolyn will bring the dancing girls, and it'll be fun.
And I'm
So
sure.
that would be my suggestion, but I really think it's important for people to, if you haven't taken a tour of that particular facility, to go with the experts and let them explain the science to you.
Thank you.
I think it may change your opinion on water
And
totally. Thank you.
Councillor Parrish can take that under advisement. Mayor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I too had made my mind up about this issue. I think we have a responsibility to protect our most vulnerable and our seniors and recent immigrants, and this is personal for me. I have a granddaughter who just moved here from Calgary. The water isn't fluoridated, so she has 4 cavities and had to undergo anesthesia and dental surgery. So I feel pretty strongly about this issue, but I'm prepared to come to the workshop, whether or not there's dancing girls. But what can I ask through the chair, that we be provided with some sense of the relationship that any decision we might make with regards to fluoridation, is any provincial programming likely to be impacted by a yes or no vote, would be of interest to me. So I'm pretty sure there's some programs that the province funds through the SMILES program, I think. There may be others I don't know about, but that would be something that I think should be part of that decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anika?
Be very brief. Don't want to speak to the issue, but just a thought in terms
Well,
of your
thank you.
time management. You've mentioned this report, Carolyn, that you're talking about, that the person, just a suggestion, instead of having the medical officer of health, back in the days when some of us were in academia and wrote various theses, if I would have gotten the call to say, hey, we want to take yours and synthesize it down to 2 pages, academia loves that, and then they can say, I was asked. In other words, instead of you having to do it, the individual does it, they're flattered at having done it, and you're not putting words in somebody else's mouth. And I can assure you that student or that will be flattered to have been asked, and they will include it, that the fact that their thesis was asked to be synthesized for reach. So I think it saves her a little bit of time, and the purity is maintained. Just a suggestion you might want to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further speakers. Would someone like to move and second the report?
That can be
Councillor
helpful.
Sprovieri, Councillor Gibson, all in favor of receiving the minutes. Thank you. The next item is the Paramedic Service 2016 Response Time Framework. It is here for information as well. It is actually here for approval. Been moved by Councillor McFadden. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I just have a quick question. I guess where I have a little bit of concern that it sort of jumps at me is the Canadian triage, the acuity scale 1 and 2 responses, because those are the most critical and most crucial. So my question is, there's been a lot of advocacy with the province of Ontario. Are we behind on those response times because of lack of, I don't know if it's lack of, but because of
Resources?
resources, thank you, from the ministry?
I'm going to let staff respond, but we set the response times on this, so for clarification. Commissioner.
Through you, Madam Chair, the way the funding works for paramedics right now is that we set the response times, we approve a budget that we feel we need to meet those response times, and it's a tricky thing, as you see from the report, because there's so much variability. Then we submit that budget to the province, and they are supposed to fund us 50%. There's a year lag time, but for the most part, they've grown over time, and it's consistently around 48% because there's this year lag. The biggest thing the province could do to assist us in meeting response times and having sustainable resources is to improve the dispatch. And that's been an advocacy point for the councillors that were at AMO. That was one of our key points we raised with the parliamentary assistant at the Ministry of Health. So that would be the biggest thing they could do to help us. But they are, for the most part, keeping up with us in terms of the 50% funding.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to second the
Yes.
report? Moved by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. There are 3 items of communication, actually 4. There was one added. It was handed out at the approval of the agenda stage this morning. It's communication item 8.4 from Ashley Mallon, a doctoral candidate. So there are 4 items of communication we'll move through. The first is from Dr. Eric Hoskins. It's here for receipt, moved by Councillor Yanika, seconded by Councillor Paleshi. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Parrish, you wanted to speak on 8.1
Yeah, I just
or
wanted to
8.2?
point out the difference between sensible, reasonable municipal politicians and crazy provincial politicians. When you look at Delaney's letter, the words jump out of the page: junk science, myth, paranoia, downright misinformation. And he's trying to convince us to think his way.
Can I convince you to deal with that under 8.3 instead of 8.1?
Oh, okay. I thought we were already over there. Speed it up.
So, would all in favor of receipt of 8.1? All in favor? 8.1?
Can I do it
receipt?
again?
We'll let you do it again. Oh, that's carried, I guess. 8.2 is the report from the Catherine Lockyer on the survey for the workshop on fluoridation. I need a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Kovac. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.3, Councillor Parrish, you're on deck.
Yeah, I already had my little rant, but I also wanted to point out 2 other things where the attached news release from the Medical Officer of Health for Ontario. I love the weasel words, has the potential to contribute to increased rates of tooth decay. And then it says, has the capacity to help reduce dental care expenditure. So hopefully we're going to get more solid answers than what we just got out of the province. And we're going to use nicer words, because we wouldn't want to use really bad words like people are crazy and they're not doing this right. I think that everybody's opinion has to be respected. And I think hopefully we'll come to some conclusion that everybody eventually buys into. Thanks.
Moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And the last item is 8.4. The handout this morning, it's here for receipt. Moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Gibson. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Moves us to items related to human services. Councillor Miles, if
Thank you.
you
and
chair
Ms.
this section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on our agenda is the Community Investment Program update for 2016 to 2017. It is here with a recommendation that is going to give authority to the Commissioner of Human Services on behalf of Regional Council to negotiate agreements with our social service community grant program. Any questions on that? See, question? Councillor Raz?
Just a point of clarification on the list of organizations. Are we looking at the exact same list? I know that there's been some changes.
I will refer your question to Acting Commissioner Bursey.
Sure. In the appendix are listed the organizations that have received funding in the past, and we will be, through the budget process, looking for your approval for the overall budget and then awarding to organizations that apply to us. Some of them will be the same that are listed there, and some are others that it's open to all organizations in the community.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't the fait accompli. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Next item is the communications. We have 2 items of communication that are here for receipt. Would someone like to move those? Moved by Councillor Tovey, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? That's carried. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Items related to enterprise programs and services, and in the absence of Councillor Fonseca, the Vice Chair, Councillor Medeiros, would
Thank you,
chair
Mr.
this
Chairman.
section. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item is Peel Regional Code of Conduct. There's a deferral recommended so that this report will be brought forward at the same time as the lobbyist and gift registration report, September 24th. Can I get a motion to move referred for Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Palashi? All in favor? Carried. Next item is a procurement of activity quarterly report. Can I get a motion to receipt? Can I get a mover? Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? Carried. Next item is regional procurement strategy. Motion to receive and presentation and report. So can I get was there a presentation going to be? Yeah. Okay. Welcome, Mr. McIntyre.
So through you, Mr. Chair, thanks to Council for giving me the opportunity to present this afternoon. Public procurement continues to evolve. Municipal business is becoming more complex, and we've got increased pressure to demonstrate value for money. So for context, I'd like to share some of the unique requirements of public sector procurement, Canadian contract law, and its impact on our business, and how we look to Council and the important role you play in supporting the procurement function. So managing risk through the lens of procurement is critical to maintaining trust and confidence in the expenditure of public funds. Some of you will have seen this slide before. Risk is managed through a number of factors: legislative compliance, open market specifications, fair and transparent evaluation processes, and sound purchasing policy. And Council's role, you set the purchasing policy, and you approved the current bylaw in late 2003. So in Canadian contract law, the competitive process creates 2 contracts, Contract A and Contract B. A sets out the rules that apply up until completion of the process, and it's formed with all compliant bidders in the process, and it means that the region has a legal contract with each of these bidders. So there are obligations to both Peel and those vendors in Contract A. And for Peel, it's to conduct a fair and open process, adhere to the terms and conditions of Contract A, and we can't accept contradictory terms. Bidders, for their part, can't revoke or supplement their submissions. And Contract B is the agreement we enter into with the successful vendor. So subject to limited exceptions, after the evaluation process is conducted, for a tender, we must award to the lowest compliant bidder, and for our request for proposal, we must award to the highest scoring bidder. So The purchasing bylaw is a component of the financial management framework, and it's designed to encourage competition, obtain the highest quality goods and services at the lowest cost, and we need to comply with federal and provincial legislation, be accountable, transparent, and open to public scrutiny. The last update to the bylaw included clarifying lobbying restrictions. We raised the low-value threshold from $5,000 to $10,000. We delegated authority to staff for requests for proposals. And since the introduction of the new authorities, there's been 19 RFPs totaling about $6.2 million that have been awarded with no issues. And to balance that delegated authority, you would have just saw the report prior to this. We initiated quarterly reporting to council for all contracts over $100,000, any emergencies, disposal, non-compliance, and final contract payments. So the report you have provides an update on the procurement strategy, and we looked at the whole procurement cycle, planning, sourcing, contract and performance management. And opportunities to improve were identified with respect to better planning, automating and streamlining our sourcing processes, as well as enhancing contract management and vendor performance. So all of our tenders for Public Works capital construction include our contractor evaluation rating system, and that's where the vendor's performance on our projects are evaluated, and they receive a score on each project they do for us. And we evaluate about 60 projects a year, and we've made some recent enhancements to the program, but before we did so, we sought input from the industry and the vendor community, and so we updated the rating system, the appeal process, and ways to recognize top performers. And the intent is to roll out the rating system to all of our contracts. We're going to start with real property construction and professional consulting engineers. The strategy also identified automation opportunities. We're going to be moving to the electronic submission of bids to reduce cycle times, enhancements to our website. We want to improve access for vendors to bid and give them notification of upcoming procurements, and while we're aligning with the region's overall digital strategy. So our vendor management program, it's a multi-year plan, and it's with a focus on vendor engagement, enhanced reporting, and improved access to bid opportunities. We want to engage the community in how to do business with Peel, educate vendors on how to submit compliant bids, and we're participating in vendor outreach sessions with our municipal partners. With regard to ethical and social responsibilities, one of the ways is we're incorporating green design standards in construction of all our facilities. We're providing sustainability awareness training for staff, and Human Services is working on ways to employ Ontario Works clients, and they're partnering with the community to employ disadvantaged youth. The procurement landscape is changing. New legislation is being introduced. We need to be ready for the free trade agreement between Canada and Europe, CETA there, and changes to the Construction Lien Act. And generally, these changes are going to require us to provide more access to bidding opportunities and enhance transparency. And we're also working on to establish a procurement performance framework to provide more meaningful business intelligence with better insight into our vendor community and into market and industry trends. So in summary, the strategy continues to focus on value for money, vendor engagement, and best-in-class procurement practices. Many government agencies have attempted to achieve this accreditation. The NIGP represents over 2,600 government agencies across the U.S. and Canada, and only 131 have attained it. So Peel belongs to an elite group, and it represents the highest standards of quality and efficiency.
Thank you very much, Mr. McIntyre, and that's really good news and really just shows the type of work that staff's doing. I have two people on the board. Mayor Crombie.
Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed the presentation. Still a learning curve for me, so I just want to ask a couple basic questions. How do vendors get on the approved vendors list? I think we get asked that all the time.
So we don't really have an approved vendor list. They can come into our portal and they can sign up and they get registered. But right now we rely on the vendors seeing our our advertisements on the website. So we post them on the region's website, the Ontario Buyers Association website, and for construction, they normally get picked up by the Daily Commercial News, and they put them in there. And then if it's something specific, we'll advertise on Merck's or one of these electronic
Right.
boards, yeah.
And do we pre-qualify for before
Yeah.
each bid?
Yeah,
Okay,
we do.
So when they ask us, we just say, check the website, it'll all
Check
be
the
there.
website, yeah.
Probably we're not the only municipality that's run into a problem with lowest bid.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some advice on that, or are we always required to take lowest bids?
No, I put in limited exceptions, and we're not always required to take the lowest bid, but unless the bid is unbalanced or it's, it's procedurally wrong, we'd bring it to council and say, we're not going to accept that because, we don't think it's the right thing to do. But if apples to apples and they provide everything and they agree to all the terms and conditions, yes, we would be awarded to them.
What if there were more local jobs created by one bidder than another?
We'd have to incorporate that into our specification.
Have we considered that?
We don't actually say local preference because we've had,
We'll have job creation.
yeah, job
local,
creation, things like
yeah.
that. So I touched on a little bit of what Ontario Works is doing, but for the most part, no.
What about requiring apprentices?
And that,
And
we're
youth
looking into
workers.
that. Mayor Jeffries has asked us to look into the
And we're,
Hammerheads program.
something we're looking at as well, so.
Sorry?
It's something we're looking at the city as well,
Okay.
requiring apprentices and young workers. And so if we could, think about that as well. I agree with Mayor Jeffrey, for sure. Do we have contracts in place with the different unions?
With the different,
Unions?
well, we go out to bid, and they could be a union shop or a non-union shop.
We don't have agreements in place in-house with the unions, or do we? I think the City of Toronto does.
The City of Toronto has more, stringent social responsibility terms and conditions in their terms and conditions, same with the City of Hamilton.
Where are we with fair wage?
So we have in there that we abide by the legislation that's in Canada, but we don't actually specifically get into living wage or anything like that. And I think we're looking into that right now.
I'd like to look into that as well. I know Mayor Jeffrey's on side with that as well. And then finally, extra points for lead standards, if they're gold or silver, or if the project will have gold or silver lead standards.
Yeah,
Are we
I
always
think
trying to achieve
I would
that?
defer to our real property people, but I know we've had lead standards in there, and I thought it was the silver one that we.
Silver
yeah.
that we aimed for? Okay, so just if you could follow up with us on those items, that would be great. Report back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. I think you brought up some good points. Councillor Parrish?
Yeah, I was just curious. Do we have, I know at the city of Mississauga, staff can spend up to $100,000 without bids or without any particularly formal rules like coming back to council. My understanding is it's $500,000 at the region?
So we tender everything over 100.
Yep.
And tenders, we don't come back to council, we award if they're compliant. So it could be millions of dollars. For requests for proposals, that was the increase that we increased from 2 to 5. So
Yep.
over 500 we bring back to council.
Okay.
And
so
for direct negotiations, any sole sourcing, anything over 250 we bring here.
over $250,000?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. No further questions. Can I get a motion to a mover to receive presentation and the report? Councillor Parrish, seconded by Mayor Crombie. 11.4, motion Treasury report. Any questions? Can I get a mover? Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. 11.5, we have a presentation by Mr. David Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council, for the opportunity to provide information on the expanded investment policy of the region. Joining me today is Paul Pohl, our Senior Treasury and Portfolio Manager. The focus of today's presentation will be on the investment policy both within the region's financial policy framework and provincial legislation and regulation, and then the focus on the proposed enhancements to the policy. So this slide probably looks familiar from James's presentation. In April 2013, Council approved the long-term financial planning strategy. This strategy applies a disciplined and integrated financial planning approach that identifies and manages risk for the region of Peel and its long-term financial sustainability and AAA credit rating. The strategy is based on 3 key pillars of sustainability: financial flexibility, financial vulnerability, and financial sustainability. The investment policy has been designed to support each of these pillars through the continual development of investment objectives, guidelines, and limitations. The Financial Management Bylaw implements the principles of the long-term financial planning strategy and provides governance over Peel's financial policies, including the investment policy, to ensure that they support the objectives of the long-term financial planning strategy. The Municipal Act 2001 provides municipalities with natural person powers except in 2 key areas: investment and debt. All regional investment activities will be at a minimum in compliance with the relevant sections of any applicable legislation and related regulations. OREG 43897, for example, indicates eligible investment instruments and the limitations for each. The formal role of the policy is being enhanced to ensure it protects council and the investment manager by describing responsibilities and ensuring that the guidelines and limitations are understood by all. The goal of the investment policy is to set out the guiding principles and establish a statement of the investment policies and goals for the purpose of investing funds while meeting the statutory regulations. The purpose of the investment policy is to provide guidance for consistent, informed decision-making. It sets forth specific investment objectives, investment options, standards for meeting those objectives, and a mechanism for monitoring the performance of investments. The current policy provides a strong base with its focus on goals and objectives and limitations that all support the 3 key pillars of the long-term financial planning strategy. All investment limitations and guidelines are at a minimum in compliance with the relevant sections of the applicable legislation and related regulations. Investment limitations mitigate risk of the principal invested through the sector and issuer diversification, as well as percentage limitations. Reduced risk minimizes financial vulnerability. Adequate liquidity ensures that financial flexibility will be maintained by allowing the region to respond to fluctuating expenditure needs. These strive to protect the principal held in the region's portfolio. Once this requirement has been met, the highest rate of return is selected, supporting financial sustainability. An update to the policy reflects more formalized ones in place across the industry and have been targeted for this year. Findings from a recent internal audit review have also been reflected in the new policy that Paul will now speak to.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, members of council. I will focus on what changes or amendments we are proposing in today's report. On this slide, the first bullet addresses our expected standards of care. The recommended policy changes were designed to formalize internal practices currently in place. This allows council to approve and for me as investment manager to work under the same guidelines and principles of the policy. The second bullet, performance standards, establishes benchmarks upon which the investments may be measured. Market indices similar in maturity, liquidity, and credit quality attributes, such as the TMX Global Debt Capital markets, are used as comparators. Third bullet on this slide, exceptions to limitations, provide some discretion over the maximums and minimums. At times, investment opportunities arise outside of our limitations. It is recommended that discretion be provided to our treasurer, David, to approve opportunities when and where appropriate. This flexibility addresses the twin pillars of financial flexibility and financial sustainability. In this slide, I will address the recommended policy amendments. Capital markets are ever-changing, and such shifts may result in low inventory of certain investment products. To keep pace with these shifts, the proposed investment policy needs to respond by making adjustments. One of the adjustments is to Schedule II and Schedule III banks. Schedule II banks are subsidiaries of foreign banks, such as HSBC of Canada, and Schedule III banks are foreign banks, such as Barclays Bank PLC, and are the only issuers we currently limit to a term of less than 5 years. The municipal act that governs what we do has the same minimum credit rating for these banks as Schedule I banks, which is AA-, and we require 2 or more credit agencies from DBRS, S&P, and Moody's, for instance, in order to purchase these. We're recommending that we increase the term from 1 to 5 years, which will give us added flexibility in the selection of these products. Point number 2 addresses asset-backed securities as a separate class of investment products that have a separate credit rating and term requirements under Ontario Reg 438/97. Only for transparency purposes, we recommend that these be identified separately. The last point talks about supernaturals. Supernaturals are institutions established by 2 or more national governments to promote economic development, such as European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and Nation. So we're simply talking about going to a 20% weighting on this, maximum weighting on this as well. The last slide talks to clarifications. In 2012, a revised banking agreement with RBC came into effect, which provides higher deposit rates than the previous agreement. So this has led to a change for us to be holding larger cash balances on deposit rather than investing in short-term securities, as this provides a better rate of return. Year-to-date August numbers, we held an average of about $326 million of cash in the bank. What this has done is the higher cash balances has necessitated some policy clarifications. So that's what we're addressing here. So on the first, number 1, for added security, we're proposed to increase the maximum for AAA and AA rated investments from 75% to 85% of the total portfolio, as this now includes cash. Cash isn't really rated as a security, but it is considered a AAA holding. Credit ratings represent the creditworthiness of debt issuers. So this increase will provide us with greater flexibility in product selection. For background information, currently 39% of the portfolio is held in AAA investments or cash, and 60% in AA investments, with only 1% in A investments. Short-term limitations are proposed to increase from a minimum of 15% to 20%, as this will now include cash. What this change will do is enhance our liquidity and ensure funds are readily available for current operations and capital expenditures. The last point is we also propose to increase the minimum AAA credit rating requirement from 5 to 15%, as it now also includes cash held in the bank. Increasing the minimum requirement for AAA federal holdings and cash held in the bank will again increase liquidity, as the federal holdings are more marketable than like provincial or municipal AAA debt. So in conclusion, the enhanced investment policy formally documents practices that we in Treasury have been using to achieve these mandates, and adopts new limitations to increase flexibility and hopefully returns.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments? Don't seem to be any. Can I get a motion, a mover? Mayor Thompson, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Next one is just for information. Region Appeals Response to Association of Municipalities of Ontario's What's Next Ontario consultation. Can I get a motion mover? Councillor Tovey, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item, 11.7. Is 11.7, yep. Update to the 2015 development charge. There's a presentation by Mr. Bingham again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my thanks to members of council for this opportunity to provide the 2015 development charges bylaw for consideration and approval. Joining me this afternoon is Bruce Taylor, who is our Manager of Financial Policy and Development Finance. This presentation will focus on the changes since my presentation at the July 9th Regional Council meeting, starting with a summary of the outcomes of the special August 13th meeting involving members of council and the development community. That will then be followed by an overview of further technical adjustment reductions resulting from that August 13th meeting and subsequent meetings with the development community, the impact of these reductions on the 2015 DC rates, and finally, proposed next steps. At the July 9th meeting, staff presented the proposed 2015 DC bylaw for consideration by council, and at that time, the development industry made deputations to council outlining their concerns with the 2015 DC rates modeling and asked for more time for further discussion on some issues. In response to the industry's request, council struck a meeting for August 13th involving 9 councillors in the development industry to discuss the outstanding issues and arrive at solutions where possible. At the July 9th meeting, council also passed a resolution that the DC charges bylaw include an exemption for on-farm diversified use buildings or structures as defined in the companion report to this presentation. The August 13th meeting was chaired by an independent facilitator, Carolyn Kearns. It was agreed prior to the meeting that the discussion would focus on addressing 3 items of concern to the building community as outlined on the slide before you. Following presentations from myself and the development industry and subsequent discussions of issues at the meeting, it was agreed by the development industry representatives present at the meeting that no further discussion was required in relation to the region's approach to recognizing the post-2031 debt payment in the rate model. However, further discussions would be held to identify opportunities in relation to how benefit to existing for roads and transportation is applied in an urban environment, and to provide further explanation surrounding the $58.7 million post-period technical adjustment for no fixed place of work from home, that was presented to council on July 9th. In response to the outcome of the August 13th meeting, regional staff held meetings with the development industry on August 28th. The benefit to existing, or BTE, calculation for transportation was extended to apply to all instances where the transportation project resulted in an extension of the life of a regional asset. Application of this principle resulted in a 15% BTE for sidewalks, street lights, and trails that are part of a road widening in an urban environment, that is, where roads are expanded from 4 to 6 lanes. It was not applied to utility costs that were primarily just relocations of non-region assets, nor for things like streetscaping where more mature trees were replaced with smaller trees. This is contrary to BUILD's request that we apply a 15% BTE credit to all project costs associated with a road widening. Staff also do not propose allocating a BTE for carpool lot expenditures, as these act as substitutes for more expensive expansions to regional roads to accommodate growth transportation needs. Staff did, however, re-examine regional carpool plans and have decided to remove 2 lots from this background study. One of the 3 originally proposed lots was close to where Simcoe County is planning a lot, and the second is unlikely to be needed by 2031. These staff proposals have been communicated to the building community as per the letter attached as Appendix 1 to the presentation cover report. The 2015 bylaw review process is an expression of the region's commitment to working with the development community and their technical consultants in reviewing the background study and bringing forward reasonable adjustments for Council's consideration. Since the August 13th special meeting and based on further discussions, it is proposed that a further reduction of $19.8 million in roads capital costs be applied. That consists of $14.6 million reduction due to an increase in the benefit to existing calculations and $5.2 million reduction for the removal of 2 carpool lots. The $19.8 million reduction in roads cost estimates since July 9th has resulted in a further $168 per unit reduction in the single and semi-detached DC rate and 34 cents per square meter reduction in the industrial rate. As previously stated, the 2015 consultation process has resulted in a number of negotiated adjustments that have seen significant reductions in the proposed DC rates being brought forward to Council for consideration. Based on the modeling assumptions used in the draft background study in April, the proposed single semi rate was originally $52,325. Since then, extensive consultations with the development community and further adjustments have resulted in the proposed single semi rate of $48,499. In addition, the region's review of the floor space per worker assumptions for the 2015 background study has resulted in an increase in the industrial floor space per worker to 149 square meters per employee, compared to 90 square meters per employee used in the 2012 background study. This resulted in the proposed industrial DC rate of $134.06 per square meter, or 26% lower than what would have occurred if we had kept the 90 meters per square employee. Not per square employee, 90 square meters per employee. Based on the information presented before you today, staff recommend that Council approve the 2015 bylaw, further to which staff will begin to implement the new policy to start collecting hard service residential DCs, except for apartments, effective February 1st, 2016, and that would be at plan of subdivision. Based on Council's direction of July 9th, staff will continue to build the new process of engagement with the area municipalities and development community using the 2041 population and employment forecasts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Unica?
I appreciate this. As it relates to what we charge and what we collect, the more the better. You've heard me say before, what a privilege that a developer gets to pay levies, because that means they're getting a building permit and a process they initiated, got them development, and it's just the cost of doing business. What I want to follow up on is, and I hope, Mr. Chairman, this is the appropriate time, but you can let me know, it's the correspondence that we've received, and I think you've all gotten it, one from Davies Howe on behalf of, I think this one's Amicon, and the other one is with regards to Pinnacle, but downtown developers in Mississauga, and a concern, I think the mayor touched upon it as well. I'm only going to read one snippet. Some of the residents in the audience may not have it. The councillors do, but from the first letter from Davies Howe, because it speaks to the point I want to make, and they're articulating it better, and these are real people articulating it, so to speak. So one of their concerns, quote, for example, as noted in previous correspondence from BUILD, the city has not properly allocated benefit to existing for a number of areas, including roads, supportive projects, transits, et cetera, growth-related studies, and commuter parking lots for areas like our downtown core. It's my old argument, why don't we service the people where the density is and more is coming imminently. The same concept, but related more broadly to the region, comes from the Pinnacle letter, a couple of paragraphs down. The BREZ is still currently addressing the area boundaries for expansion and also includes 3 pockets of areas outside the Greenbelt in the rounding out areas. It is our belief that further work and assessment is required to accommodate the anticipated 2031 population and job growth. Although option 3 of BREZ is considered the more economical choice for option 1, it may still not be the best use of financial resources in order to meet the region of Peel's growth plans. Finally, as a developer in the region, it's our goal to continue to attract increased population. Our belief is that any additional development charges that the community does not benefit or realize in the foreseeable future, that's the fundamental point, does not achieve this goal. So Having said that, we had a marvelous conversation with regards to it at Planning and Development Committee. Councillor Sato's not here, but a project in her ward where the density is coming. We've got reports that it's ready to stick a shovel in the ground on an intensification site. We had a rather disturbing regional comment at the time that says, well, we're not really ready for you. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. It's being reassessed now. And we're saying, well, we need it now. It's going to be going up soon. You're not servicing us. But, 2020, 2030, 2040, 5,000 more homes may go there, and I put those up in a year. The same old thing that I've been on for a while. So I guess my general question is, I have some concern that we may be, with regards to the BREZ, upfronting and putting in services that maybe aren't the most dramatically needed at the present time, predicated on development that has not been finalized yet, when our need is now. I hope you see the question in that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Unica, Councillor Unica. I think those are excellent points. I'm not sure if there's any more further comments.
I would like staff's comments on the concern that I'm expressing that relative to, we need this, I'm speaking specifically to the BREZ, but others, because that's what my constituents have raised, that, like, what are you doing out there when I need it here? And what exactly are you servicing out there? And the quantums, the densities relative to what we need. The issue, I must say, a GO train station in Bolton. It's come up before. I brought it up again, and I want more clarity on that. So is it imminent? Is it going to be built next week? Is it going to be built in 30 years? But are we allocating resources when, going back to my Councillor Sato example, we needed them a year ago? So where are we headed with this? Because you can see the concerns that other people in a need now situation are asking us.
I can respond generally, Councillor, to that. We do have just over $80 million in our background study for BREZ. That is to service the 10,000 population in Caledon out to 2031 that has not presently been allocated.
Right.
That population, wherever it goes in Caledon, will need servicing. So this is in as a budget in 2026. For servicing of an area that Caledon has identified that they would like to put that population in.
But I just...
As far as Mississauga goes,
yes.
I know projects have been brought forward to bring water service to the Mississauga City Centre area. I don't know if in the particular application you're referring to, whether that is covered by that or whether
this one was in
there's other
Meadowvale. It's in Councillor Sato's ward.
Okay.
And it caused quite some concern at Planning Committee because we had a rather cryptic letter from, I thought they would have communicated with the region by now, but it caused quite some concern because I'm going to try to paraphrase for Councillor Sato. During the summer months when the region was diligently doing its work as though you'd signed off, and then it was reported back to us at the meeting on Tuesday, well, you better slow down. You might not have the water and sewer capacity you need. Now the developer's upset. We're wondering where it's gone. But my fundamental point is the same. This is a project that we might be issuing building permits for in 6 months or 9 months. And you're saying, but 2031, we need 80 million up here. You can see how it doesn't sell well for those of us that are taking all this density today. Yeah, 95 cents on the dollar on my dime, I can understand why. We don't have that luxury.
Thank you. Please. Is there any further response from staff? If not,
sorry, I don't know about the servicing in the Meadowvale area. I don't know whether.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you. A bit more direct. I would be quite happy if we could amend the motion, the DC bylaw, to take the 81 million out and put it back in 2017 for deliberation. And I'll tell you why. We just got the LRT. We've got tons of high-rise going up Highway 10. I asked your staff to give me the difference in costs if we took it out for the next 2 years when all our building boom's taking place. In a single and a semi, we'd save $735 a permit, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's flow through. It goes right to the person who's buying the house in the end, the developers. I've had several colleagues say, well, I don't get complaints from developers. Well, the reason you don't is it goes into the price of the house, and the person that we're supposed to be taking care of, who buys the house, is the one that pays the money. Other residential, $601 savings, small units, $298, apartments, $451, and that's my big issue because we've got a lot of condos going in. So 20,000 condos going in on Elm in your big complex there is $9 million extra DCs being collected now When, as Mayor Crombie asked the question, have you decided on BREZ? Have you located BREZ? Is anything going on there yet? And it appears to be a twinkle in your eye. So I think at 2017, and the dates you're giving us of 2026 and 2021, you got tons of time to collect all the money for that, for what you need in BREZ, whereas we are going to be inundated with building permits. We are now. I have a whole bunch in Ward 5. The other difference, too, is industrial, it'll save the industrial builders $2.05 a square meter. That adds up really fast. I've got 8 car dealerships going in on the corner of 401 and Dixie. So this stuff is going to hit us hard right now. And it's not urgent in that we're paying for something that hasn't even been decided on yet. And I'm not saying it won't be, and I'm not saying I'd fight it in 2017. I think it'd be great to get it in advance, as Mayor Thompson has suggested. It still gives you tons of time to collect it, but it gives us a bit of a break right now when we're doing our heavy building up Highway 10 and we're finishing off City Center. So I would like to amend the 81.8 to 2017, not take it out, move it to 2017 and give our guys a bit of a break over the next 2 years.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Swark, who would like to make some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, the only comment I was going to make is that the DC bylaw is based on the long-term plans that we do. So first of all, we allocate the population, then we do the master plans to service the lands, and then we work out from that in negotiations with the development industry, the infrastructure that needs to go in and when it needs to go in and what the cost will be, and that is broken down to the DC charge. So that's all I was going to say. BREZ is really a marker for the 10,000 population that's been allocated to Caledon that has not yet come to council. The other issue that regional council that is, the other issue we have, and we've been having discussions with the area municipalities and actually have direction from this council to work with the industry and the area municipalities on trying to find a resolution to this, is that we put those long-term plans in place, and then we have situations like Councillor Yanika's talked about where the actual development occurs at a rate faster than was anticipated in the plans. So we plan to build, take an example, to increase the capacity along Burnhamthorpe to Mississauga. In our plans, it's in there for 2021. What we're hearing from the developers, they want it 2016, 2017. So this happens all the time, and it's trying to balance, and that's why we've gone into debt, is to be able to cash flow the development, the infrastructure faster than the development is coming in. So it's an ongoing struggle that we're having. That's why we have debt, and Council's given us direction to work towards a 2017 bylaw with the industry and with the area municipalities to see if we can find a better way to close that gap between the planning and the actual. All the BREZ money does, the only reason the BREZ money is in there is because we have to plan for the 10,000 population. BREZ, based on the town of Caledon's decisions, have given us a more detailed amount of money that we know we can put in for that. But whether it develops in in the Zone 3 lands, Option 3 lands, or somewhere else in Caledon, we still need money for that 10,000 population.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Councillor Groves.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. The 10,000 population, was that part of ROPA 24?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
The 2031A numbers.
Right. So I guess in speaking to ROPA 24, this council, and it is my recollection, I think I was here when ROPA 24 was approved by this council, correct? with the allocation of the 10,000 population to the town of Caledon. And just for a minute, we're going to take BREZ out of the equation. Let's call it, I don't know, let's call it ABC. So ABC development. I think to Mr. Swartz's point, this is a responsible way of doing planning. We approved ROPA 24, this council did, allocated a number to the town of Caledon through a very comprehensive exercise. I believe ROPA 24 was also approved by the province of Ontario, recognizing the very good work that the region has done and all the municipalities, Brampton, Mississauga, Caledon. So I don't think that it's unusual that we plan for future development, wherever that may be. I think that in your report on 11.8, it does represent sound financial long-term planning. This is what the region has always been about. And I'm actually very proud to be sitting at the Region of Peel, but I don't know about currently. We've had some discussion around it that I'm not so sure right now. But in the past years, the region has been very, very fiscally responsible. And I think that we're one of the best regions around when it comes to being responsible financially. And to our Mr. Lebrecq and his team, or Steve. So I don't see the issue that we're having. And to your point, Councillor Anika, and with all due respect, I'm not sure who Pinnacle International is, but this is one developer expressing concerns about a particular development in town of Caledon. It's my understanding that BUILD, who represents the development industry on a broader scale, is in full support of this type of planning. So I'm not sure what the concern here is, and I'm not sure how it's different. It's any different from what we've done in the past. So maybe staff can provide some clarification. I don't know. Because I'm hearing this from members of council who approved ROPA 24, supported ROPA 24. The town of Caledon did extensive financial planning in looking at the numbers that we are able to support. The Region of Peel also went through a very complex, very comprehensive review and supported ROPA 24. So I must be missing something. I'm not sure what it is I'm missing, but maybe somebody can enlighten me.
Sir, sorry, was there a question there?
Yeah, the question is,
you'd like staff to comment?
I'd like staff to comment because this is a type of practice that the region has done in the past in development, and I think we did that for Northwest Brampton, and somebody can provide some kind of clarification that is it unusual to do this type of planning?
Thank you.
I can speak to that, Councillor. Just I'll start generally and ask Steve to fill in or correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, as I said, we do the long-range planning. We estimate what the long-term costs are going to be. We develop a DC rate and start collecting the DCs. That money, as we collect it, goes into a reserve fund. And then it is pulled out as it is required. In the perfect world, it would be pulled out as we had planned to use it. In reality, what happens is the money goes into the DC reserve and is pulled out as it's required. So we bring it in steadily and pull it out in lumps to service different areas of the region at different times. So it's not really the BREZ money. It doesn't go into a pot with BREZ on it and sit there and not be touched until that particular development happens. Right. It goes into a general fund, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, and is used as is required. So in Councillor Inika's example, that money would be pulled out and used to help the development that's happening ahead of schedule in Councillor Sado's ward. And in the halcyon days of the past, when the DC money was coming in faster than we could develop, we had enough money in the pot. More recently, the DC money came in more slowly than we had to put infrastructure in the ground, and therefore we had to top up that reserve with debt. But, so Steve, I don't know if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, and I think through the process, and I think David elaborated on that at the beginning, the 2015 DC bylaw is really the direction we had from council is to ensure that it's financially sustainable as the first principle. Moving it forward is based on the 2031A population that was approved through ROPA 24. The master plans subsequently are developed based on the official plan. Now that Caledon has gone through a planning process and identified a cost of servicing in Caledon, we've refined the master plan costs. The costs are in the forecast out in 2026 beyond the 10-year capital plan, so nothing's going to happen today. Council hasn't made a decision on where the 10,000 unallocated population will be located in Caledon, so that decision's not up for debate from the perspective of the DC bylaw. It's really to make sure that we have sufficient funds to cover all of the costs as we go forward. If Caledon, or the planning process determines a different location for where the development occurs for the 10,000, the next update of the DC bylaw would obviously reflect a revised costing. But this has presented to us now an opportunity to update the costing based on the best available information so that we're planning for the long term and that Peel remains financially sustainable.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. Well, all about long-term planning, but I'm also concerned about short-term. We found out this week that in Meadowvale we need a new water main and a sewer pipe. So do we dip into this 81 million for that? Because we're building there immediately. Is there a capital reserve fund for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, development charges go into reserves based on each of the programs. So there's one for transportation, there's one for water, there's one for roads. Or sorry, roads is transportation, and that's collected across the region. As David was mentioning, those funds go into those reserves, and they come out based on the projects that are in the background study. Generally speaking, that is at the time the projects are scheduled in the background study, but there are circumstances where projects are brought forward or pushed back.
They're ready to go. So.
If I may add to that, they're pulled from the money is pulled from the DC reserves to the extent that the construction, the infrastructure is required for growth. We also have another set of reserves that are for state of good repair. So if the replacement you're talking about is because of age or some other reason other than growth, it would be funded from a different pot of money.
And it exists?
That exists, yes.
Okay. So I just want to make a comment to Councillor Groves, who was referencing the 10,000 population that hasn't been allocated. So on the corner of Huron, Ontario and Eglinton, we have 25,000 people going in the next 5 years. In Amicon, 10,000 more people. So, you know, for us to sit here and reserve for something aspirational, an aspirational project 15, 17 years down the road that we haven't even voted on, you know, perhaps you want to change the name of the line item from BRES Reserve to Capital Reserve, Future Capital Reserve.
If I may add a clarification, Mr. Chair, there is no BRES reserve. It does go into...
It's what it's called.
It goes into... part of the money that will be raised will go into the DC reserves for water and wastewater. Part of it will go into DC reserves for transportation.
So the line item says BRES. But how can you assign something that we haven't voted on? Can you go back one slide, please? 2 slides. That one.
So why don't you just call it anything but Caledon?
Call it Capital Reserve.
I mean, this is a list of technical adjustments that we're making through the DC bylaw. It's not a list of reserves. If anything, it's closer to a list of projects, but even there, it's some of it's
But it's a misnomer.
more high level.
That isn't a project that's been voted on.
Right. So you look at provisional post-period water capacity.
I have
not a project, not a reserve.
Mhm.
It's an amount of money that is coming out of that general program. So
Right.
this isn't a list of reserves, or it is technical adjustments to the DC reserve.
But then under that, you have Caledon Lands, BRES, POPA 14-04.
Right. So that is a technical adjustment in the background study to bring in estimated costs for BRES. But it's not a separate line item reserve.
But how could that be when we haven't voted on it yet?
Again, it comes back to, we have a ROPA out to 2031. This DC background study is based on the 2031A population numbers. We have 10,000 population in Caledon that is unallocated. This is the information, as the CFO was explaining, is the best information we have from Caledon as to where that population will go, and that estimate is the additional cost to service that population.
And is it part of the master servicing plan? Is there one?
That would be added in the background study. That would have been included, I'll check with the Commissioner.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, the original master plan did not include the Brez lands because they were unallocated.
Still unallocated.
It's still unallocated, but given that in the calculation, this is basically a technical math question, the denominator includes all the population and jobs. The numerator should then have an estimate of the cost of supporting those population and jobs. The best available data that we have coming from the Caledon's planning process was related to Brez. We incorporated those costs as well as in that Brez piece. There's also some transportation issues related to goods movement along the grade separations on Coleraine and King. So it's kind of mixed in there, but those were last minute kind of updates that we brought back in the spring to further enhance the master plan. So in our update, they would be included once we have a determination of exactly where the population go, but it's an estimate right now.
Councillor Parrish referenced the development going on in Mississauga with respect to Highway 10 and along the Huron-Ontario corridor, and of course the downtown and the Brampton downtown that is intensifying. Is it part of the master servicing plan too?
Yes, all those projects are in the plan. To the CAO's point, some of the issues we have is the planning that we were provided as far as when those developments were going to occur has changed. And, you know, while agile, we have some agile engineers. They're not always, it can't always run on the minutes, but the $500 million Hanlon Mississauga City Center feeder main project are around getting infrastructure into the core of Mississauga. The $100 million Burnham Thorpe water main, which we advanced from in the late 2020s into now, is all about trying to meet those needs. And I'm not, neither the gentleman behind me or myself are familiar with this Meadowvale issue. We'd be happy to follow up, but that's an execution of the plan issue. This is a financial planning issue. They're related, but this doesn't affect how we deliver on a day-to-day basis.
Are we discussing new financing options when we review the DC, when we conduct the next DC review in 2017?
That was part of our commitment for the 2041 planning process, was to look at engaging the development community earlier and discussing other options for financing.
Well, then wouldn't we be wise to park that $81 million until 2017, as Councillor Parrish suggested, so we can look at it with respect to the new financing options?
As Commissioner LeBrecq explained, in this DC bylaw, we have population and employment to 2031, including the 10,000 in Caledon. That's in the denominator. It therefore makes sense to include the cost to service that population in the numerator.
Well, then I'm going to ask that you just change the name, because it refers to a project to development that is site-specific that we haven't voted on yet.
We can very well change that to unallocated Caledon population servicing.
Yes, we can do that.
It's not a problem.
It's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all the explanation. It's been very helpful. My interest is not whether or not we delayed a year or two, because obviously we're going to need the money at some point throughout the system, but rather how accurate do you think you might be, because we have been falling behind on this reserve account, and maybe plus or minus 80 million isn't even the number we should be actually talking about. So I'm more interested in the going forward from now. Are the bumps going to be smoothed out such that we can make a draw for instance, you didn't know, and maybe you should know about the Meadowville situation, or some quick new development that's coming in Cooksville? Like, do we have the flexibility built into this system, plus or minus 80 million? I'm sure we're really talking about billions of dollars, really, going forward, because we have been going the wrong direction with this reserve account. Correct?
I'll step back and really, the region is going through a generational increase in its water and wastewater capacity. The South Peel system was designed to service up to, I think, one concession north of Mayfield and over 1 million population. And in the past, those pipes that the province put in, that the province borrowed for, designed, built, and then charged us through the rates, were way over capacity. Those pipes are now full. And it's really this generational increase of coming up from the lake all the way up to Mississauga City Centre with the Hanlon feeder main, and then on up into northeast and northwest Brampton to service population there, that is really generating most of the borrowing we are doing. So it's yes, there's a little bit year by year as either revenues are slower or expenditures are slower than anticipated. The debt borrowing is actually a little bit behind, well, a fair bit behind what we were forecasting in the 2012 DC bylaw. And even though the revenues have been slower, the expenditures have been even slower than that. So there is flexibility. The debt gives us flexibility financially, that if a project has to be moved forward, we will look at the other projects and see if there are opportunities to postpone some to balance off one moving forward. And if there isn't, and the additional debt is sustainable, then we would look at financing it through debt. But as I said, we haven't issued the amount of debt we originally thought we were going to be issuing at this time.
Mr. Chair, sorry, do you want to speak?
Just one other point of tension on that is that as we build the finance plan, the DC plan, to service the growth that we anticipate, we try to put as much in the plan as we think we need and enough to give us some flexibility. The industry pushes back hard to make sure that we put as little in the plan as possible, because they don't want to spend more than they believe they have to. So looking at the same chart in front of you, you see that we've reduced 119 million for GE Boost wastewater project. So initially we would have put a project in there we anticipated that we needed, and through negotiations with the industry, we've decided that it can be delayed. So, so it is a give and take with the industry to try and get as much money in the plan to service the plan and to be as flexible as we can while still being fiscally responsible.
And that brings me to my last point, Mr. Chair. When dealing with taxpayers, we try to pluck the goose so it squawks the least with 1 or 2%. The development industry, what I'm getting at is we should be trying to avoid, and I believe we do, 10% spike, then, oh, sorry, that was too much, then 0, 0, then 12 and 0. And my idea or my thought is that we make something that's predictable and something that the industry can live with over time. And that's why I'm wondering whether even the leading 80 million for a couple of years, or the part of 80 million that you would collect in 2 years, whether that's even worth the effort, in that I'm not entirely certain you're collecting enough money, period, let alone giving a delay, given that it's a pot of money that we're drawing on, and the number of projects that are coming ahead that none of us seem to know about, because there's all kinds of intensification now, and as you know, that comes quickly to small lots of land. It's not like the old 600-acre farm that's being slowly developed. It comes in quickly with an application. So that's my only caveat on it. I'm not sure we're collecting enough money, period. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Miles?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm just a little bit perplexed again at the direction we're going. The Caledon lands should be in the plan because they were they were approved in ROPA 24. And all it is doing is building the regional bank account so that, in fact, rather than having to borrow funds to meet our infrastructure needs, we may have the money in the bank and not have to borrow. So to remove $81 million just does not seem like a fiscally prudent idea. And I would imagine that if we wanted to sit down and take Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon and start taking pockets of lands out that we think maybe aren't going to be developed within the next 2 years, we could be in quite a bad situation again. This isn't normally the way that we would be looking at a development charge bylaw, and I would just encourage council to move ahead with the development charges as recommended by staff.
Thank you, Councillor Miles.
I'll second that.
Councillor Tovey.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a wonderful conversation, by the way. I'm really quite enjoying it. I mean, before I got here in 2010, I was really surprised. Well, when I got here, I was incredibly surprised at the amount of debt that we were taking on to invest in infrastructure. Particularly given that, being a resident in Mississauga, I was always brought up with the mantra of, growth must pay for growth. And then when I got here and realized, oh my God, we're borrowing like $1.6 billion to upfront for growth. Then Chair Kolb started asking some interesting questions like, are we actually going to have any land left over when we pay the debt off that we need for all this growth? Well, the answer from staff was, no, there'll still be debt left over and you won't have any land left. And then, well, who pays for that? Well, our children and our grandchildren. So we I think very responsibly decided that we should put together a growth management committee so that we could actually study what this growth is, how much this growth was going to cost, and how we could share that cost equitably so that growth would pay for growth. We've been doing that work now for a year and a half. We're well on our way. We're on our schedule for 2017. The money that they put in here is perfectly appropriate. One of the things that really shocked me, and I have to compliment the Region of Peel's infrastructure people for planning and doing their capital budgets exactly according to the numbers that we, the area municipalities, give them. My favorite example, of course, is Councillor Unica's ward and Councillor Kovac's ward, where the city of Mississauga years and years ago determined that we want to build a downtown city center, so we have to lift the height restrictions, and that was a very smart thing to do, because now we're getting a really exciting downtown, which is fantastic. So that's a really good thing. But when our planning staff got a hold of it, the numbers that they sent to the region for the infrastructure were all based on 25-storied buildings. And I met with our staff when I was first elected, and I said, "You gave developers unlimited height, and you thought they were only going to build 25-story buildings? What planet are you from?" So the region, of course, had done their planning, their infrastructure planning, based on those numbers. So I've got my hat's off to Caledon if they've given us good numbers. I think that's great. And now we're looking at, a retrofit of our downtown core in Mississauga that's going to cost upwards of $120 million. So just these types of funds that we need to put in, prudently need to put in, they're going to go to the Meadowvales, they're going to go to the downtown core, they're going to go to whoever needs them. It's whoever's got a shovel ready to go in the ground, the region will figure out how we're going to be able to service that. I had exactly the same thing in my ward. They identified in 2006, they identified that there would be no pumping capacity, sewage pumping capacity on Lakeshore. I got elected and had 12 developments going in along the Lakeshore, and then got a nice, polite little email from the region, "Oh, there's no pumping capacity." And I went, I'm finding this out in 2011, and it was identified by our own staff, our city staff, in 2006. So, but that pumping station is now being built. The developments are all in the ground. They're all working. So I know that piece is going to work. So I'm fully supportive of this. And I would hope that all of my other colleagues on council will realize that this is the responsible and prudent thing to do for the Region of Peel and for every one of our residents. Because the one thing I have noticed since I've been here, and I was thinking about this last night, I really am a citizen of the Region of Peel. I grew up in Malton. I played lacrosse in Brampton. My band played in the Flower Festival in Brampton for years. I played lacrosse in Port Credit and swam in the Credit River fell off a donkey when I was 8 years old up in Caledon on my great uncle's farm. So we, yeah. Some people say I should have got kicked harder, but but what I've found about this region is that when we all stick together and we all work together and we help each other, we are stronger. So I would encourage everyone, please support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tovey. I will recognize that you're quite the Renaissance man. So as we move,
Well said.
Councillor Raz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would echo Councillor Tovey's comments. I support what's put in front of us by staff. I know you're fixated on the $81 million, mostly because it's related to BREZ and not because of any other issue. And I'd be more concerned with the $543 million that were adjustments made to the overall DCs. So we're probably not putting away enough, and it's the existing people who live here, not the ones who are going to be coming in the future, who are going to be paying for this. So I would support what staff has put in front of us, and I look forward to renegotiating DCs in 2017.
Thank you, Councillor Raj. Councillor Parrish?
Yeah, actually, I've learned a lot. So the pot of money goes in, and then we just put a title on it, and then we move it to wherever we need it. Is that roughly what you're saying? As long as you can justify it with people numbers.
It's based on the background study and the master servicing plan. Once the population is allocated to the areas, they determine by what we call sub-geographic units where they think the population and employment is going. The engineering teams, the master servicing
But it can
teams
be moved as required.
we look at moving it and look at the financial impacts of that.
Way back a million years ago, when I was chairman of the Peel Board, I went to Queen's Park with Hazel, believe it or not. We were buds then. And she helped me get DCs for schools, for school boards. But the hoops we had to jump through when we applied to say we're going to put so much in the DC pot, this is what we're doing with it, then it was audited very carefully when it was done. So I assume you're audited very carefully and you have some flexibility as to where you move the money.
Well, and that's part of the reporting requirements, Councillor.
Yeah, good.
We annually have to provide a list of projects that development charge funds are being applied to, and that's our biggest auditor, quite frankly, is Build.
I can see that. My other question is, I have a very vague memory, and I don't know who from Brampton could correct me. But at one point when Brampton was doing heavy building in their city center and trying to attract building into the city center, they either froze their DCs and came here and asked us to freeze the increases or something like that. Did that happen? Or am I having a gin dream?
It didn't happen at the region. My
Okay.
understanding is the City of Brampton does have a community improvement program that
Center,
has a number of criteria, and if you meet certain criteria, you get
But
reductions.
it never applied through to the DC charges up here? Okay. So that would be something we could do with our own city center or our LRT path if we chose to down in Mississauga. Okay, good, thanks. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just get a clarification, Ms. Locker? Mayor Crombie had suggested changing the name of the pot, of renaming it. Is that something we accepted, or is that a motion that we have to vote on?
No, we can take that as direction to change that.
Take that as direction? Okay. Thank you. So can I get now a mover to receive the presentation and the report? Councillor Miles, seconder, Councillor Tovey, all in favor? Carried. I also need another mover to receive the 4 additional communications on DCs that were in our folder. Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Pelletier, all in favor? Carried. Now we go on to 11.8, which is the actual resolution. Is there any questions? No. Are you on the board? No. Okay. Councillor Groves is moving it, seconded by Councillor Pelletier. All in favor? Carried. Can I get now addition and renovation, our next item, addition and renovation at Peel Regional Police. Can I get a motion to carry it? Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All in favor? Carried. Next, we have, encroaching, so our next item, as this is in Councillor Pelletier's ward, can I get you to move it? Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Miles, all in favor? Carried. Our next item, Councillor Groves and Innes, would you guys like to move it? Oh, Councillor Innes will move it, Councillor Downey will second it, all in favor? Carried. Next item is report of the Debt Issues Committee. Can I get a mover? Councillor Tovey, seconded by Councillor Starr. All in favor? Carried. Now we have a report on Government Relations Committee, the meeting that held September 3rd. I'll pass this over to Councillor Tovey, who has some comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We had a terrific meeting this time with the Government Relations Committee, and again, and now that we're in open council, I'd really like to thank all of the councillors that came with Sue, came to AMO. It was absolutely fantastic. We had great meetings with everybody. It's all sort of in the report. Mayor Jeffrey brought up a really good point when we were looking at our draft strategic public relations for the election, that it wasn't, she didn't feel that it was strong enough or quite specific enough or really fell into lockstep with more what FCM was doing. So we took the strategic directions report back, and David worked on it. Hi, David. David worked on it, and so now we have it here updated. It's a little, I think it kind of puts out the region's position in stronger language, I think. And so it's here actually for approval so that we can start twittering it out and get ready for the election. So is it going to be up on the screen and we can vote on that? I'd put forward a motion that we adopt it.
Thank you. Just before we go, Mayor Jeffrey, you're on the board.
Can I just offer my thanks to staff for their speedy response to, they turned this around, I think, in less than 24 hours, so I really appreciate it. And can I just ask that the minutes reflect that I'm not a councillor? I think in 3 different locations it says I'm councillor, so if we can just have a correction to the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Duly noted. Are we waiting for, will this be projected? Is there any projection or? Okay. So moved by, as you see on the screen, that the revised draft 2015 federal election key priorities of the region PL be approved. Moved by Councillor Tovey, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now we go on to communications. Receipt recommended.
You also need a motion for the 11.13 for the report from the GRC.
Yeah, my apologies. Can I get a motion for 11.13? Moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Innes. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now we go to communications by Mystery regarding the notification of environmental registry posting. Staff's recommending receipt. Can I get a mover? Councillor Palashi, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have a next communication. Staff's recommendation regarding an email regarding What's Next Ontario update. Can I get a mover? Councillor Tovey, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. All in favor? Carried. And I believe, is that Mr. David Arbuckle's coming? Yeah. Is he? Oh, it is fine? Okay, we did. And that's it.
Well done.
Over back to the chair. Thank you.
Before we move into the items related to public works, and I would call on Councillor Starr to chair that, Dan, could you just maybe just briefly explain what the white books are all about?
Yeah, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you have nothing else to do on weekends, but this council's asked us to include at the October 8th meeting a special session on the kind of reviewing the 3Rs program and then subsequently what are we doing with disposal. Given that a lot of the decisions on the strategy, on the PERC project were done ahead of this council, we thought we'd put together a little kind of reference binder for you, and we're going to send it electronically, but we got feedback that doesn't always work on an iPad if it's this big. This gives you a bit of a summary of some of the key documents that the previous council authorized and approved and are in the public domain. So if you want to bring it around as your reference document, that's great. If you have any like pre-meeting questions you can bring them to me or Norm Lee, and we'd be happy to help you with. But it's just to help you on that session. I don't think everyone will read every page, but anything that's of interest on this process is already in here. And we'll cover this off in a short presentation on October the 8th.
We're going to hold you to that.
It's under 200 slides.
So great. That's like a week.
And that's why we gave you a big binder, because once you put the report and the presentation in, it'll be full.
Oh, jeez. Councillor Starr, if you'd like to take this section.
There'll be a quiz on this, by the way.
You're tested and judged all the time, just as we are.
Very nice. Okay, first item on Public Works is 13.1. It's the local improvements for noise attenuation. Any questions, comments? Moved by Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor Carlson.
Just to thank staff for an excellent report. I couldn't have written a better one myself if I was even qualified. It's nice to bring all our noise walls into alignment, so to speak, regional and city, because that makes it very hard, very hard to explain to people along regional roads why their neighbors on the city roads got the new noise wall and they didn't. So really, Frank Dale and I believe we started on the noise wall campaign. I was still in short pants, so that's how long we've been working on it. So congratulations, thanks very much to staff, and I don't see too many objectors, so maybe I get thanks to my colleagues too. Thank you.
Councillor Parrish.
I'd also like to thank staff for this. I was the noise wall queen when I got on council last time in the city of Mississauga, and boy, did it make our lives easier, and the city looked so much better. This is a healthy thing to do, too. There's a lot of people suffering from noise, and I assume it's still 50-50 on new walls, new installations, and replacement is our problem. So all we have to work towards now is 100% on all of them. There's always hope. All right, I know. Thank you very much.
Dan, do you want to comment on that? I saw your eyebrows furrow.
Well, these, Mr. Chairman, these are private noise walls that were built by developers.
Yeah.
So we're saying over time, we'll bring them into the public domain, put them on public right away at our cost, so actually at the cost of all taxpayers in the region of Peel. One of the planning issues is then we would like to, in future, when site plans and development applications are coming, to minimize situations where developers again are allowed to build substandard walls on private property, and we would expect them to be planned for to be built in the public right away. They would then, it's subject to, the conditions might be in the development charge bylaw, and then again paid in a different way. But there's no 50-50 once this is being adopted, and we've kind of basically funded it. Okay.
Okay, moved by Councillor Mahoney, second by Councillor Carlson. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Item 13.2 we've already dealt with. 13.3 is waste management strategy. Any questions, comments? Moved by Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Kovac. All in favor? Carry. The fourth item is a contract. Any questions, comments? Moved by Councillor Sprovieri, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Carried. We have 3 items of communication. To meet your approval, we'll do them all at once. Any questions or comments? Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Miles. Oh, I'm sorry, McFadden. You had your hand up, so it's McFadden. It's McFadden. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Any other business? Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're to other business, seeing none. Oh, you're on?
Yeah.
Councillor Mayor Crombie.
Sorry, this has just been something that's I've been thinking about. Sometimes our binders are very thick and they takes no time at all, and other times they're very thin and they take all day, and sometimes like today there are a lot of contentious issues to get through. I wonder if we couldn't space it out a little better and maybe we meet more regularly. I don't know, because it seems like today was very dense. It's almost 3 o'clock, and other days we're through at 11. Can we spread out the agenda a little better and meet more often if we need to? I find by 1 o'clock we're all kind of... What do you think?
If we all agree to stop talking about the Caledon planning issue for the next 4 meetings, we're going to get so much done.
I think I'm still on the board. I think, that may be true of the past couple of meetings, but to be honest, this is an ongoing thing since I got on council. The work's not distributed evenly, just notwithstanding Caledon issues. So can we make the binders a little more equitable or
I
find some
hear
more
your
meetings for us
point,
to
Mayor.
attend? Yeah, because they're pretty dense, and we had some contentious issues on top of the regular workload.
You have to remember, though, the last time we met was July 8th.
Okay, that's true.
So a lot of work got done over
But
there.
let's try and spread them out a little more in a balanced way. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. Councillor Miles.
Well, we're just, I would like to request that the Region of Peel actually start providing members of Regional Council with their agenda in paper format. If you look around the room, we are all having to print them back at home. I have never came to a Regional Council meeting yet that I have been able to properly utilize the agenda on my iPad, and even today, with the assistance of our staff, they opened it up, and as soon as I went to a different section, I could no longer access it. So I don't know if it's just me, but if I look around the room, look at everybody has their agenda printed, and I think it's the region's responsibility, other than Councillor Moore, it's the region's responsibility to provide us with paper.
But it is not
Paper,
easy to
because
use.
we are getting extreme flack in the city of Brampton for printing these and being told we're going to have to pay. So I do think that the region, even though I know your policy was no paper only, but we're just printing them in the municipalities, and that's really not fair.
It's downloading. You're downloading to the municipality.
Downloading, whatever. It's not working. And quite frankly, the agendas are too large and too big to handle on the computer. They really are. So I would request, even you can circulate a note and ask members of council who would like to receive a paper copy, because I'm really frustrated
Okay,
with it.
yeah, we'll accommodate that way. I think it's a good
Okay.
point, Gail.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sprovieri.
Yeah, Linda's going to charge you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that same point, Mr. Chairman, a lot of the paperwork is communication, and I know communication is important. Perhaps that can be sent to us by electronics, and the rest of the agenda can be sent to us on paper. So maybe we can save some paper that way. So communications, a lot of it is just information. So maybe you can consider that too. But anyway, I should be in bed by now, so that's why I'm kind of a little slow right now. I was in bed 2 nights ago, this hour.
Councillor Parrish.
Thank you.
I've made a rule this term never to disagree with my mayor, but in fact, I'm going to disagree with her today. Most people put in a 7 or 8 hour workday. I put in 12-hour workdays. I much rather come up here every second week and do a full day. You're saving the environment, you're saving gas, you're saving all kinds of other things, and you book it and you have it. So if you're going to do a straw poll, I'm happy every 2 weeks, full day. Keep me till 6 o'clock if you want.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're at notices of motion, which there are none. Now we're at bylaws. Moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Innes, that the bylaws listed on the Regional Council agenda being bylaws 46-2015 and 51-2015 to 54-2015 inclusive be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the Regional Chair and the Regional Clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Moved by Councillor Starr, seconded by Councillor Gibson, that bylaw 55-2015 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on September 10, 2015, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the Regional Chair and the Regional Clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And this is moved by Councillor Sprovieri, seconded by Councillor Shaughnessy, that the September 10, 2015 Regional Council meeting be adjourned.
Happy birthday to Sprovieri.
Yeah, I forgot.